Good evening, and welcome to this forum, this public forum, with the candidates for Superintendent of Public Instruction, Kirsten Bays Ler and Tracy Potter. My name is Ann Jorgensen Green with the League of Women Voters, and I will be your moderator this evening. This candidate debate has been organized by the League of Women Voters of Bismarck-Mandan and is co-sponsored by Dakota Media Access and the Bismarck Tribune. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that promotes the informed participation of all citizens in their government. The League does not endorse or oppose candidates or political parties. This debate is intended to be a respectful exchange of ideas. Our purpose this evening is to provide voters with information about the candidates and their positions on issues that affect the people of North Dakota. The audience here tonight is asked to reserve applause or other comments until the forum has ended. Tonight's debate forum and format is as follows. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to each question. Candidates are asked to comply with our time restrictions so that we may get to as many questions as possible. Our timer will let you know when you're down to 30 seconds, 10 seconds, and the indication to stop. Following responses to the question from both candidates, we invite the candidates to exchange in a dialogue about the issues raised in the previous question for no more than 3 minutes. The first person who had answered the previous question, will begin that crosstalk. Now, let's get on and learn about our candidates. Each of you will have 2 minutes to introduce yourselves and to tell us why you are seeking election as Superintendent of Public Instruction. We'll begin with Ms. Kirsten Bays Ler.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you so much to the League of Women Voters of Bismarck-Mandan. It's such an important service that you provide our community, and we're very grateful for the time that you dedicate to this. My name is Kirsten Bays Ler. I grew up in a small town called Flasher, just southwest of here. And growing up, it was never a question of if you served your community or your state. It was just a matter of how you could best serve your community and state. And that has been my journey, to find out how I can best serve. My entire adult life has been dedicated to the growth of children, both emotionally, physically, academically. And when this opportunity came up, it seemed like it was the right calling for me. I felt that my experience as an educator for 22 years in the classrooms and hallways of Bismarck Public Schools, combined with my school board leadership in Mandan and really leading Mandan School District to a better time and having our student scores improve the way they are, and as a parent, those three capacities really gave me a comprehensive view of what education was and what we needed to do to push our students forward in North Dakota. I feel that it allows me to bring the ideas. I'm so up to date and current with the issues that really impact our students in the classrooms every day, and I want to lead North Dakota to make them #1 in the nation again for our students.
Thank you. Mr. Tracy Potter.
Thank you. I want to thank the League, particularly President Kathy Osteen, Shar, Ann. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss these issues that are so important in North Dakota. And it is very important. We're about to choose the first new superintendent since 1984. 28 years, Wayne Sandsted, and it's very important that the person chosen have the right experience, skills, and attitudes for the job. This is a really big job. It's 100 employees, and they're state employees. It has a $1.7 billion budget. It runs the State School for the Blind in Grand Forks, the State School for the Deaf in Devils Lake, and the State Library. It has federal funds mixed in with those state dollars. And I believe an appropriate resume for an applicant for this job would be something like this: an advanced degree, classroom teaching experience, management experience with particular emphasis on managing state employees or a very large organization, budgeting experience. And it'd be a nice bonus if the applicant had served in the North Dakota State Senate. And this is the big distinction in this race. In terms of policy, there are differences. I've heard them. In approach to the office, and I'll return to that, there are clear differences. But the biggest difference between the two candidates in this race are the experiences in managing a large and diverse organization. I have precisely those credentials.
Thank you. We'll now move on to our questions developed by members of the League of Women Voters and the Bismarck Tribune. The candidates have not been provided advanced copies of these questions. Question number 1, Mr. Potter, will begin with you. North Dakota elementary and secondary schools have been assessed by a variety of testing agents. The results range from an average to not having made adequate yearly progress. What kind of a report card would you give North Dakota elementary and secondary schools?
I think North Dakota schools are great. One of the key things in this report card is what are the conclusions of it. In North Dakota, we graduate more students than almost any other state, fewer dropouts than almost any other state. More of our kids go on to college than almost any other state. And the combination of those two puts us right at the top. We've always had great schooling in North Dakota. I'm concerned about the concentration, the attention paid to those testing, particularly in the elementary grades. This is a national movement that I believe is threatening the quality of our education. I hear from teachers all the time, particularly those in the elementary grades, there's too much testing. Our kids are not getting enough time for learning. They feel that they are being pressured, and that's taking away from the children's opportunity to learn. I believe that we're, again, focused much too much on those standardized tests, which can only lead to really standardized students. And what we need to do is take education, find the children where they are, and provide them with the skills that necessary to pursue the interests that they learn while they're in school.
Ms. Bays Ler, same question.
The question is, what grade would I give to our schools? And I would say that that single snapshot of that one assessment on that single day in the life of our students is not an accurate measure of what our schools are. I also believe that our schools can always be better, and our students deserve that. So the AYP exam that you are, or excuse me, the NDSA exam that you're speaking of for AYP that measures us as average or below average is not something that I would use. But there is a process in place that I think we need to continue to look at. I was part of a webinar and conference call today that has us looking at a different accreditation process for our schools, which would put all 183 of our school districts on the same measurement for accreditation and the same matrix and the same rubric. So our legislators can answer that question, or can have the answer to that question that they ask. What are we receiving for the return on our investment for our dollars that we're investing in the education? And that's taking a look at things such as our graduation rate, our success of our students at higher ed, the amount of remediation that our students are needing when they even transfer from elementary to junior high to high school. And those are the types that we're going to look at. I do believe our schools are doing well. Can they do better? Absolutely. And there are processes we are looking at to make them better.
Mr. Potter, any response?
Yeah, I think this does touch on probably the single biggest policy difference between myself and Ms. Bays Ler, in that we have, I have a hard and fast view that we are too much testing is going on, that we're demanding some way to account for, to measure something that is truly immeasurable, and that is teaching. Teaching is an art form, and we're attempting to determine whether or not our teachers are good based on test scores, when in fact, you know, there's so much more to education. And this focuses the curriculum of our schools on those things that are testable, and it focuses the attention of the teachers and the students on those things that are going to be tested. And Ms. Bays Ler, accepts the premise, disagrees with No Child Left Behind, just as I do, but accepts the premise that there is something out there that can allow us to objectively measure teacher quality. And I say that it's just not true. It will not happen. You can't do this. And the point of doing it is only one thing, and that is to improve teacher quality when you find teachers that are failing at it. Well, let's just directly improve teacher quality through our state institutions, through better teaching at our state institutions, through mentoring. That first few months of teaching is a terrifying experience, and we lose a lot of good teachers in that period going up to Christmas time. Just imagine for yourself, there are so many people who would rather die than be a public speaker. I mean, you know, the survey says people would rather die than be a public speaker. Well, teachers are public speakers every day, you know, 6 periods a day in front of a class of people that are maybe not really interested. This is a difficult job. It's a great skill. They need help to do their job, because that's the only way that you improve educational quality for our students, is to help the teachers do it. And measuring them by the testing is just not how it's going to happen.
Ms. Bays Ler, any final thoughts?
Yes, I'd like to. I think the purpose of assessment is student learning, not the focus of teacher evaluation, but student learning, and we have to go to the students. When we talk about student learning, assessment is important, not to put a label on people, but to drive instruction. And if you're using assessments to drive instruction, it's a very valuable thing. What you need to do is, I would hate for a 4th grader to come in, and if a teacher isn't assessing them, if they've already learned the concepts of geometric shapes or geometry, then let's not waste any time reteaching them that. If they don't have the basics, let's not push them beyond. A teacher needs to know where their students are at in their learning so they can begin the learning there. And that's the purpose of assessment, to form your instruction.
Thank you. Ms. Bays Ler, next question is for you. A significant number of North Dakota high school graduates must take remedial reading or math classes as freshmen at our state colleges and universities. What initiatives would you take to address this issue?
This is a very important issue to me, and I've already begun work on that. In August, I had a press conference where I announced that one of my very first initiatives, if I were elected in November, and would begin working on in January with our lawmakers, is to address that very fact. I visited with people, our Senate and House Education Committee members, and they are supportive of this idea. What I would like to do is start a pilot program offering funding to school districts that have innovative ideas, because what we need to do is take a look at what our ACT scores are for our 11th graders. All of our 11th graders in North Dakota are required to take the ACT exam. We have to use the results of that. In these innovative school districts with these programs, I would ask these counselors, the school personnel, to have meetings with these students that have been identified as probably needing remedial courses in college, having a consultation with their parents and that student, and not only using the ACT score, which is an indicator, but also their core course scores, sitting down and having them plan a senior year that is rigorous and robust, and having the college skills before they enter in and have to pay money for a college course that's remedial. It's part of my plan. Our lawmakers support it. I'm anxious to get it into action.
Mr. Potter, same question.
I served on the Interim Higher Education Committee during the 2007-2009 interim legislature, and we dealt with this. We looked at it, and the other problem, which is the students not signing up for a second year of college. We do graduate almost everybody, and a lot of us go on to college and then have a problem. And they've identified some of the reasons for that are the remedial courses that are necessary. The solution for this, as far as I'm concerned, is to get the high school teachers and the college professors together in a room and let them hash it out and talk about what it is that they expect, as opposed to legislatively driven or bureaucratically driven goals on this, and certainly not driven strictly by higher ed. I heard Chancellor Giovanni talking about his plans today, and I have to say I'm very disturbed by this, because the idea that came out clearly was higher ed is going to raise its standards, which is going to raise the standards and the quality of education in our high schools. And I'm sorry, that it just doesn't work like that from the top down. And it needs to be a conversation that takes place with the superintendent of public instruction, and that's what I told him.
Ms. Baylor, any response?
Yes, I have said since the beginning that there needs to be a continuum of learning from our preschool through our college graduates into graduate school. That can't just happen overnight, and it can't just happen because we wish it to happen. We have very little time to do this. Our legislative session is beginning in January. Last week, Chancellor Schiavone and I had a conversation because there are expectations. We had a meeting, and there are expectations that he is going to be expecting from our K-12, and we need to begin discussing those. And that goes both ways. We need to expect that our teachers that are being produced by our universities in North Dakota are of quality and ready to teach that rigorous coursework in our K-12. And what is it that we can do in K-12 to prepare? And if we begin with this year's freshmen, we can prepare them, and we can significantly reduce the costs to our families. The student loan debt in North Dakota, in the nation, is too high for our parents and our students, and we need to do something and begin working together to have that conversation.
Any final thoughts, Mr. Potter?
Well, certainly nobody disagrees with college costs being too high. As a parent of a recent graduate, I'm wondering how he's ever going to pay off his student loans, and I'm not going to do it for him. That's all there is to it. But the chancellor's, the way this was just phrased, the chancellor is going to expect this from K-12 education. The chancellor has no right to expect this from K-12 education. The chancellor is appointed. The superintendent of public instruction is elected. That is a higher position. And if we want to have this discussion, it has to be held with the superintendent of public instruction, not just coming down from the Board of Higher Education, which has had plenty of its own problems to deal with over the last few years.
Mr. Potter, next question is for you. As an agency, as you mentioned, the Department of Public Instruction has operated under a single superintendent for decades. How is DPI performing, and what, if any, changes would you bring to its administration? You know,
this is interesting. When we started this journey last spring, there were 3 candidates in the race, and all of us were saying largely the same thing about the office. We all want to make it less regulatory and more mentoring. Every candidate said that. And the more that I have talked to the people in the department, the more that I have studied their plans for the future, the more I realize that these are good people that are doing good work. And they are moving the department in what I would consider the proper direction, which is you've got 100 people there that are involved in education. They shouldn't just be setting standards and then asking people to meet those standards. What they need to be doing is taking the best practices, bringing in the last 10 Golden Apple winners, and having them meet with the staff and talk about best practices and then disseminate those. And particularly, this is important today with the growth of technology and the importance of technology to our learning. So I don't think the department needs great changes. I think what the department needs is a gentle transition from Dr. Sandstead, who's done, I think, a very admirable job. He has the right attitudes towards taking credit for things or just getting things done, and he gets things done. I think the department is very good. It needs a steady hand on the tiller, and I intend to be that person.
Ms. Bays Ler.
Having worked in education K-12 for the last 22 years and worked closely with the department as an administrator on many aspects and as a school board chair, that we have in Mandan, we lead 500 employees and oversee a $3.3 million budget. That's significant. So you have significant interaction with the Department of Public Instruction. And I do believe that there does need to be a culture change to empower. I will agree with Mr. Potter on this. There are wonderful people up there that are very well-intentioned and eager to do good work for the students of North Dakota. But we need to empower them to do what they know to be right for our students in North Dakota. And I believe that we need to change from a regulatory agency to a more service-oriented agency. And we need to interpret the federal laws and the state laws as least restrictively as possible. And I would say that with a culture change and by empowering and transforming a culture or work environment, I have the experience that has done that. In Mandan, I see one of our teachers, our former teachers here now, he's retired, but in Mandan, we weren't a good functioning school district for a while. And over some real systemic changes and some empowerment of our teachers, empowerment of all of our employees working together as a team, we have students that are #1 in reading and science because we had systemic district changes that allowed our students to flourish because of our teamwork. We can do that at DPI.
Thank you. Ms. Bays Ler, next question is for you. Should the state legislature mandate the amount of money each school district must dedicate to teacher salaries? Should the state determine what benefits school districts must offer to their employees?
At this point, there is, of all the new money that comes into a school district, 70% of all new money must go to teacher salaries. And this has worked well. It has allowed our school districts to pay our teachers what they're worth. I don't believe that the state would ever want to get into the employee business, the employer business of mandating benefits. There are state employees, and I think the TFFR system that is in place is a beneficial and a very workable situation for both the school boards, school districts, and the school employees, the teachers. I know that TFFR has undergone some changes, and we are, I think, the solution, the compromise that the last session came to bring TFFR back to its feet and restore it to wholeness is a good plan, and I'm anxious to see how that's going to play out with the next stock market. But I don't think that there is any legislator out there that would want to get into the business of defining benefits for school district employees.
Thank you. Mr. Potter.
I'm sure Ms. Bays Ler will explain the statement that we're paying our teachers well. I don't think we're paying our teachers what they're worth, I think was the phrase. I don't think anybody in North Dakota thinks that our teachers are being paid what they're worth, or across the nation. But the answer is to this is not to set a single state standard for what a teacher is going to be paid, because there are such great and growing local differences in what it costs to live. A teacher in a small rural town that is losing population can have a house for rent for a few $100s. Right now in Williston, where they just gave teachers, I think last year, a $1,300 or $1,500 increase in their base, rents went up $4,000, for so many of them. So I don't believe that we can do this. What we need to do is we need to provide the funding for the taxpayers to be able to pay the property taxes that the local school districts are required to get to meet the needs of their educational system.
Ms. Bays Ler, any comment?
I think we moved away from the question a little bit of whether the state should define benefits, but to address the teacher salary, we obviously are going to have to develop some sort of assistance for those teachers in our housing shortage areas. And school districts, local control is a big component of mine. And local school districts are coming up with some pretty innovative ideas and some different ways to solve that problem. But in the case of teacher worth and teacher pay, always I think teachers are our most valued resource in our school classrooms and our school hallways. And we need to continue to find ways to adequately provide good salaries for them. But again, I'm going to say teachers are a dedicated profession, and many things, again, using Mandan as an example, we were never going to be able to pay our teachers what they might be able to receive across the river without changing their lifestyle. And so because of that fact, we had to come up with a way to recruit and retain quality teachers. And we did that by becoming an organization that was getting things done, that was making a difference in kids' lives, and becoming an organization that good teachers said, I want to be part of that movement. Something good is going on over there. And that's what we can do in the state of North Dakota.
Any final thoughts, Mr. Potter?
Just that on the teacher's retirement, defined benefits. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with the state defining benefits as a base for across the state. That you know that when you're coming to North Dakota as a teacher, if you put in your time, you're going to have a comfortable retirement. I think we can do that as a state.
Next question for you, Mr. Potter. What do you think are the necessary components of a great teacher evaluation system? And do you believe that these evaluation systems should be collectively bargained?
I'll tell you the number one qualification, I think, for a great teacher evaluation system is that you've got great principals, great superintendents. I believe in managing by walking around, and I think that's important that the principals do that as well. I think I had a meeting with the superintendent of the Bismarck School District, and Tamara said, Ms. Usselman said, you know, I've set a goal for my principals. They're going to spend 1 day a week outside of their offices and in those classrooms. And I'm going to spend 1 day a week out of my office and in the schools. And I thought, well, that's really admirable if it's not happening, but my gosh, 20% of your time is all you can dedicate to being in the classrooms. The principals should be doing that all the time. And this is where, this is the key. I just do not believe that you can come up with some kind of a testing, a scoring system that allows you to evaluate teacher quality. You have to watch the interaction of the teachers with their students, and then you can judge. If you're good, you can judge whether or not the teacher is getting through and whether the students are learning adequately. And that's the important part. It's the people. And teachers are the most important part of the educational system, and after that, it's the principals making sure that teachers are doing their job.
Ms. Bays Ler, same question to you.
Could you repeat it just so I'm clear on
Absolutely.
the question?
What do you think are the necessary components of a great teacher evaluation system, and do you believe that these evaluation systems should be collectively bargained?
Absolutely. I think teacher evaluation systems and the profession of teaching has established for ourselves exactly what we know to be true in good teaching. Content knowledge is important. Effective teaching methodology is important. The ability to plan good lessons is important. The ability to change differentiated lessons for students at different learning levels is important. Those are all good things that we know as teachers are important. And when we talk about good evaluation systems, and that's established by our own profession, when you talk about teacher evaluation, teachers, principals want to be evaluated because we want to improve. And we don't look at evaluations as a punitive system or a mark against us. We look at it as a way for us to grow. And I believe that's very important in the profession. And that's why teachers, you know, we have teacher mentors and we have teacher coaches. And we as a state have developed some teacher evaluation, and I think the key is that we're also moving away from talking about just teacher evaluations to teacher and principal evaluations, because we know that the effectiveness of a principal is integral to the success of our school systems. We know that good, effective principals can not only recruit and retain good teachers, but they can take marginal teachers and make them better. And so we do need to invest in good evaluation systems so our teachers can do what they truly desire to do and grow and improve. And we need to move away from, I remember when I first started, if all my bulletin boards were up in September, I was a good evaluation. And there's so much more to that. And we've grown, so we need to implement them.
I wonder if each of you would address the second portion of that particular question. Specifically, should those evaluation systems be collectively bargained? Mr. Potter.
Should they be? Should they not be? My belief on collective bargaining is that whatever the people who are being collectively who are collectively bargaining can put every issue on the table. You do not lose your First Amendment rights, your freedom of association, your freedom of speech, because you have become a public employee. And so, if the teachers decide that they want to collectively bargain over the evaluation system, they have every right to do that. Whether or not it should take place, I'm not certain, but we can't stop it unless we are stopping people from being able to use their constitutional rights.
Very specific example. I don't know how you could have an effective or useful evaluation system unless all the players are at the table discussing it. And it's not a collective bargaining issue, but just at Monday night's board meeting, the school board approved a study, a committee that is being put together by our Mandan school administrators and our Mandan school teachers, our MEA association, to take a look, because they all know, they all agree that the evaluation system that's in place right now may be meeting the measure of the law for our century code, but it's not helping our teachers become better. And so we approved it, and their meetings will begin next week. To begin developing and discussing a good components that will be useful to our teachers. So yes, it's a team effort.
Ms. Bays Ler, next question is for you. What changes, if any, should be made to the North Dakota school accreditation standards?
That's the webinar that I was participating in, or was allowed to sit in on today. Right now, we used to have, we had administrative rules that were quite complex and quite numeric in their substance. It was the number of books that you had on your library, the number of hours that you had. This legislature did away with those, and so the accreditation systems that we had in our state were 3 different choices. You could either be advanced ed accredited, which is NCA, you could go through the state accreditation system, or you could go through North Dakota Mile, which was part of the No Child Left Behind AYP portion. And what we're looking at right now, and there's a proposal that our legislators will decide on, is to go towards a statewide advanced ed accreditation system. And it moves away from the counting of number of teachers, counting of number of minutes that you're with students, to the quality of the instruction. And that is, we are still going to maintain our high quality. There are certain areas of assurances. We need to assure that every school in our state has this. There are best practices that will go by, and it will be a school improvement model.
Mr. Potter.
This is a key issue that strikes at what our obligation is. Our obligation, it's the first thing that is in the superintendent's duties, legislative, not constitutional, but legislative, and it says, you know, you're going to provide a system of education, for quality education for every child in North Dakota. And so the school, whether that is the home school or the private school or the public school, has to produce. It has to in some way provide the necessary standards. I don't really believe that there's a need to change dramatically our school accreditation standards. I think it's been working for us in North Dakota, but it is certainly something that you have to look at all times to make sure that every child, whether they are is receiving across the state, they're receiving essentially an equivalent education.
Ms. Bays Ler, any response?
I think moving to the single advanced ed is going to actually help our school districts. It's going to allow, it's going to be more cost effective, it's going to be more efficient to have the Department of Public Instruction work with one accreditation system, but it's most importantly going to allow the Department of Public Instruction to do what I had said I'd wanted to do, allow them to be more service oriented. They will be working with one accreditation system, and they will be the warehouse, if you will, for the ideas of what might be working in West Fargo that could be shared then with Bowman. And when you're working with one accreditation system that is geared towards, as a goal of school improvement, all of our schools can improve, and all of our schools are eager to improve. When you have a warehouse and one accreditation system that's coming up with those ideas, it's more efficient and it's more service oriented.
Mr. Potter, any last thoughts?
Actually, no.
Next question is for you. Do you believe that the Department of Public Instruction should be able to impose sanctions on school districts that do not comply with state standards?
It has to happen. Otherwise, you haven't got any. You have no teeth. And but the point of this, can you imagine? I mean, what is the result of sanctions on a school? Who's hurt by sanctions on a school? You know, it's the kids in the school. Eventually, it comes down to that. And so the superintendent needs to have authority, and he needs to wield it almost never. It really needs to be something where you cajole, you intervene, you suggest. That's the position. I've never been in whatever body, in the state senate, in any place. I've never been a fan of regulation, because regulation means that it's notoriously inefficient. It's inherently inefficient. There's somebody over my shoulder. I'm not working as well as I should, and that person over my shoulder is not doing what they perhaps should be doing. And so I think this again, the superintendent needs the authority and needs to almost never wield it.
Ms. Bays Ler.
I think school districts do need to be held accountable, and that certainly is a role of the Department of Public Instruction and the superintendent. Schools do need to be held accountable. They need to know that this is what you need to achieve by this time. And I believe that local control is very important, but there does need to be accountability. So in short answer, should schools have to suffer a sanction? If that's the level of accountability, yes, but it shouldn't simply be imposing the sanction. It should be, this is the sanction, what can we do to help you comply to what needs to be done so we can get the students what they need to reach their next level of learning. We have to remember that the Superintendent of Public Instruction, that the Department of Public Instruction exists for the sole purpose of helping our students learn and achieve the things that they can achieve. We wouldn't exist and we wouldn't be talking about anything tonight unless we remember that it's about the kids.
I think we're onto something here that is is distinctive. If you look at things from the point of view of a school district isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, we're going to punish the school district. Well, who is the school district? The school district are the parents, the students, it's the whole system. The superintendent may take a hit, the principals may take a hit, but really if you're sanctioning a school, if you're punishing a school district, you're punishing the students within that school. You're doing it to try to raise them, to help them, to raise them up. But how is it helpful? I think that this is the missing the perspective of who are the schools there for. The schools are there to educate our young people. There's nothing that our state government does that is more important than the education of our young people. We can build roads. We can. That's about the only other thing that's critical. We don't have national defense in the state. We have the schools, and we just need to remember our focus is on the children, not on the people who are administering. Excuse me, those children. I get so excited sometimes.
To put it very simply, and this is where I feel that all of my roles really combine to make me a good leader for this position. When I have 3 grown children, and when they made a mistake and they didn't do what they were asked to do, I didn't simply punish them. I said, you've made a choice, you've made a decision, these are the consequences, now what can we do to make sure that that doesn't happen again? And that's a simple way to say that's the role of the Department of Public Instruction. There's been a choice here. These are the consequences. Now what can we do to make sure, what can I do, what can the state do, what can the department do to help you make sure that that doesn't happen again so these consequences aren't imposed upon the students of that school.
Ms. Bays Ler, what should be the highest education priority for the 2013 legislature?
The highest education, that's a little twist because most of the time it's a very simple answer when I get asked those things at the forum because it's like, what should be the highest priority of the 2013 legislature? And I simply say education. The 3 most important things that I would like to address immediately. We need to deliver the funding to our rapidly growing school districts in a different manner so they can receive the money when they need it. We need to reduce the number of remedial classes that our students are needing to take in college, and we need to do that through college prep courses, as I spoke about earlier, being delivered their senior year. And finally, we need to empower our school districts, so I'm hoping that this year's freshman class, that 25% of this year's freshman class will graduate with at least 15 credits of college credit when they enter their freshman year of college. And we can do that. That will significantly reduce the student debt loan, the time it takes for our students to get through college, and really enable our high flyers to get where they need to be. Those are the three most important things, and I have already begun working to try and get that accomplished.
Mr. Potter, same question.
I believe that the single most critical need for the 2013 legislature is one that should have been taken care of in a special session in 2012, and that is providing adequate funding for the rapidly growing school districts, particularly in the oil patch, but this is true in other places as well. We have a problem. And long-range planning would have been nice. Would have been nice if we had grown at the rate that we could handle. But the fact is that right now we have to do something dramatically, because there is there's a 9-year-old in 4th grade someplace that's the only time they'll be in 4th grade, and they're spending it in a FEMA classroom that is overcrowded. You know, a FEMA classroom from the 1980s, is the way I understand. It's just something that we have to deal with right away. The other issue that is a larger one, but touches education directly, and that is property taxes. We almost had a revolt that would have been a disaster had it passed, Measure 2 passed in June. We have to do something to address that, and I have a plan to do that, but I have to take more than the 10 seconds that are remaining to me, so I'll wait for a minute.
Ms. Bays Ler, in response.
Property taxes, that's going to be a significant discussion, as it should be. Our legislators do need to address that problem. There were 16 bills that were proposed that all involved property tax reform. Some of those, the majority of those, included some reform to the school districts. All of them will impact school districts in some way. It will be very important for the superintendent to monitor those bills and to weigh in on those bills and address and analyze the impact, the potential impact that those bills may have, whichever one of them makes it to the floor, whichever of them make it to the floor, and certainly they will not come out in April as they went in January. But it's important that the superintendent weigh in and provide information on that, but we certainly will not, that's the legislator's job to create the property tax reform that is necessary, but it will be the superintendent's job to be an advisory and an information and provide some advice on what might be best for the school districts.
Mr. Potter, you have a little time.
Thank you. The superintendent has a role to play here, and that is to defend local control. That was what was wrong with Measure 2. It was that it took away local control. And there is something that went in January and came out in April, essentially the same, and that was the property tax relief bill that I sponsored as a senator in 2007. It died because you don't let it was the biggest tax cut bill of the 2007 session, and you don't let a freshman Democrat do that in a Republican legislature. But the fact was that that was the compromise that ended the session, and the compromise was that you gave the taxpayers the money to pay the property taxes through a property tax credit in their income tax forms. And this is something that we could do much more efficiently than what we're doing right now. Rather than telling, here's the school district, we're going to buy down some mills for each taxpayer. No, the money comes back to every taxpayer on the income tax form, and they get to, that would encourage, of course, even people who don't earn income to file an income tax form and receive the property tax credit. It works. And essentially, there are other plans that work as well. There are. The essential thing, though, is that the superintendent stand there as a bulwark against taking local control away, because if the school district in Fargo wants to build and the voters have voted for it and they want to pay their teachers more, God bless them, let them do it. That's their business, and we'll help the taxpayers pay those property taxes, but make sure that there's some skin in the game from the local school board as well.
Mr. Potter, what are your views on state-funded preschool programs in local school districts?
I think this is an area that could really be a boon for North Dakota. Take a couple of twin problems. One is lack of employees. You see it every place. Businesses have stopped advertising their product. They're all advertising for people to work for them. I know I face this at Fort Lincoln in every area, at the Riverboat, at Fort Lincoln, at Five Nations Arts. We have this problem every place. If we, as a state, provided quality preschool then our students would not start school behind. And this is the other problem in education, right, is that we try to evaluate our teachers based on the standardized test scores of their students, but they don't all have the same product coming in. Some are in homes that kids are read to, and they're middle class, and they value education, and others do not. We can, instead of Head Start for only those children that qualify for Head Start, I'm talking about a universal kind of Head Start program that allows parents a safe place to send their children, even before 5 years old, that will be productive for their educational future.
Ms. Bays Ler, same question.
As a advocate and a person that's had her life, dedicated her life to the education of children, I know that the research is absolutely clear. The work that we do with those youngest children, 0 to 5 years old, is critically important, especially for our most disadvantaged. This weekend, the North Dakota Association of the Education of the Education of the Children of the Young Child, I believe is what it is. They had their conference, their annual summit in Fargo. They invited all the candidates, and I attended, and I spent the morning and the afternoon with them in Fargo. And what I learned about those programs and what I learned about those youngest, most fragile children was amazing to me. I've always been a supporter of Head Start, the federally funded Head Start program. I believe it's critically important, and as an educator, I know, I see, it was just in May where I saw those children from our most devastating homes in this community come into our classrooms, and we struggled with them every week. So that early intervention, that early education is critical and can be the difference. The thing that I struggle with in North Dakota with that at this current time is our space issue. We have so many space issues in our school districts right now. It would be very difficult at this point, and that would be a hurdle that we would need to discuss with our lawmakers, because to add preschool into our existing K-6 or K-5 schools would be very difficult to do at this point. So, but we need to keep that conversation on the table.
There's virtually nothing North Dakota can't do right now. We have a $1.6 billion surplus coming. We have almost $2 billion in the Common Schools Trust Fund. We have a $2 billion surplus in the coming year. If we have the will, there's a way to do this. And it is very important that we provide early childhood education. But there's something I want to say about this too. I did a news conference in Fargo on Monday on this very topic, because there is nationally a push for more and more testing at these early grades. 25 states have mandatory testing of kindergartners. Have they repealed Piaget? My teacher training taught me that, until about age 7, large muscle development is the thing that kids should be involved in, and yet we're more and more dominating this and driving them towards the scholastic side. Here's what early childhood education should be: learning to socialize with other children, learning to socialize with parents that are not, or with adults that are not your parents, and learning that there's a whole world of education. There's a wonderful world of math and science and reading and things that are available to you, but we don't need to drive you and test you at that point.
Couple things. Just about the kindergarten testing, just a bit. As you mentioned, there is a whole array of students that come into our kindergarten classroom. Some have been read to, some have a vocabulary-rich home, others don't. And so that testing, because we've come such a long way in technology, a simple 5 to 10 minute test in kindergarten, it's called Dibbles, can immediately, within a half an hour, tell you whether that child is at reading level or not. And to me, that's very valuable time, because if that child is already recognizing sounds and letters, there's no need to place them in that same conformed learning group. So that's where assessment can really be informative. And I don't want to see that go away, because if they're already past the sounds and letter recognition, let's move them on to the different exploratory where they can continue to be curious and not bored. Back to the preschool question is this. What I also learned at this conference is what the state can really do is, I think, improve our standards and improve possibly our licensing requirements. And so those daycare providers, those current private preschool teachers are of higher quality. And there is a big, there was support from that among this group of that profession. So let's have those people that are providing the preschool, let's have them be, meet the expectations that many of our states across the nation already require, so they can have rich preschool environments as well.
Ms. Bays Ler, next question is for you. What is your position regarding the state's request for a waiver from No Child Left Behind?
The waiver. I've been on record on this issue before. I am personally was not in favor of the application of the waiver for No Child Left Behind. I want relief from No Child Left Behind as much as anyone does. As a former teacher, vice principal, school board president, I don't believe that the punitive sanctions are good for school districts. But I don't believe that this waiver application provides the relief that we're all looking for. It replaces one set of rules and punitive sanctions with another set of rules and punitive sanctions. And I don't believe that that's what we should force our school districts to conform to, yet another set of rules and learn those. So with that being said, the waiver has been applied for. We'll wait to see if it's been approved. And I'm confident that the state of North Dakota, even if it isn't approved, that we will move forward and implement the good ideas, the principal-teacher evaluations, the good components. We've already adopted the core standards. We will implement that without Washington, D.C. telling us that we have to. The only good part about the waiver possibly is that if we do receive it, we will be able to focus our resources on a smaller number of schools, because by 2014 it's inevitable that 100% of our school districts in the state will not be meeting adequately or yearly progress under the current set of rules.
I'm also on record in this issue in that my record was that I'm really puzzled. The fact is that I did not think that I would have applied for the waiver. But that was based on my conversations with superintendents, who then changed their minds and decided that we were going to apply for the waiver because they felt that they at least had crafted it in such a way that it would be the least restrictive thing. My attitude towards all the federal regulations in this regard are minimal compliance, stall, delay, minimally comply, see how what the penalties might be, and then let the legislature decide whether or not it has the desire that the federal restrictions that are coming are so restrictive that we need to, in some way, just say, well, we can do without this money. It's a lot of money. It's $375 million in this last biennium. That's a chunk. On the other hand, the state can do anything the state wants to do. But I'm not concerned. I'm not really, I hear clearly from my opponent, fear of the federal government. Well, I'm just generally afraid of intrusion into the classroom by state government as well, and so I really believe that we have to tread very lightly here.
Ms. Bays Ler, any response?
Well, as a school board member, I am completely in agreement with local control. That's one of the pillars of my campaign, and I believe that the components of the waiver, the ones that I believe that North Dakota will implement, will come from the local control and be teacher evaluation, principal evaluation systems that derive from the teamwork that I talked about, the committee study groups such as Mandan that they've put together. That type of local decision making is going to be critical to anything, but we don't need Washington to tell us to do that, and nor do we need, Bismarck, the capital, to tell us to do that. We do know that, but there does need to be accountability, and I think that that's where there is that dual role of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, the Department of Public Instruction. I firmly believe that educators are committed to the growth of kids, and we need to provide them the guidance and the support, and have the checks and balances to make sure that the needs of our students are being met.
Final thoughts, Mr. Potter?
Well, that final sentence was almost exactly perfect, because it is all about no one gets into education. No one gets into teaching to make a lot of money. If they do, they really should be fired because they're not, cognizant of what's going on in the world. And it's just not true. Everybody gets into teaching because they want to help children. And that's where I want to free them. I really am a firm believer in academic freedom. I think that the idea of, for instance, Common Core, as a concept, I have some problems with it. I'm just not sure that every teacher should be teaching the same thing in the same way and ending up with the same kind of kids coming out. You know, I believe that the teachers should have the ability to follow their interests, and the kids will find over time that they've, you know, had an interesting variety of teachers in their lives, as opposed to trying to stamp them out in one regard. And now I've lost the train of thought and the question, so we'll move along.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. That concludes the question portion of our forum. I want to thank both of the candidates for being here this evening. You will now have 2 minutes to provide any closing statement that you would like to make. Mr. Potter, we'll begin with you.
Excuse me for this, but part of offering yourself for office ends up being pretty close to bragging. And I want to make a point about resumes and accomplishments. There are job titles and then there are accomplishments. And in my career, I've had many accomplishments. One of my proudest was the Circle of Cultures event at the University of Mary, when we had 52,000 people come in to learn about Lewis and Clark, and more importantly, about the Mandan, Hadadza, and Arikara Indians that greeted them. 10,000 school kids came that week. And it may come as a surprise, but I certainly have spent more time teaching in the last few years than my opponent has, despite her position in schooling, in education, because I've taught as a visiting lecturer in classrooms and in that great big classroom of the outside. The kids from Horizon Middle School, the 7th graders, can tell you, and their teachers, what we did at Double Ditch the other day. All through May and September, I'm teaching, and besides that, I'm teaching teachers, because we have interpreters that deal with 4,000 school kids a year. It's literally hundreds of thousands of people have gone through the educational system that we operate. The last thing I want to talk about is, I understand not just the politics of this, but the politics of state government from the inside out. And I regard with great respect the term of Dr. Sandsted, and I'm willing to promise right here, right now, that I will not serve as long as he did. I chose to approach this no-party office in his same fashion, as a nonpartisan. And it shocked me. It was completely unprecedented when my opponent bought advertising that says she is the Republican candidate for this office. That's like running as the Republican for the Supreme Court. It's just not right, or any of the other offices on the no-party ballot. They are no party for a reason, and that's because they're above partisanship, and that's how I chose to run and how I chose to serve. It'll be in a bipartisan, nonpartisan fashion.
Ms. Bays Ler.
Thank you. With all respect to my opponent, but in the defense of all the teachers and educators out there, I do take some offense to the fact that you would compare lecturing and giving tours to the daily work of what teachers do in the classroom. The first thing that you learn as a teacher is, just because you've taught it doesn't mean they've learned it. Just because you've said it doesn't mean they've heard it. And the parent-teacher conferences, the daily review of how their kids are doing. If they know it, what am I going to do? If they don't know it, what am I going to do? And doing that daily, that is teaching. In response to your partisan, I did run and received the letter of support from the Republican Party, and I did that because that's who I am. And I thought that it would be best to state who I was. And I'm not making the position partisan or party-based. I simply stated who I was. I work with everyone, and everything that comes for us for the improvement of education for our kids, not a political agenda. I thought it was better to say that I did belong to a political party instead of, when I clearly have established myself, and you have established yourself and referenced it many times this evening, that you were a Democrat senator. You belong to a party to say who you are. That's who we are. And we talk about resumes. I believe that it's very important for us to really take a look at the resumes. And I have the comprehensive resume that encompasses all perspectives of education and the issues. And I've proven myself as a leader of a district of 500 employees and $3.3 million budget. I've done that now for 9 years. And I believe that the students of North Dakota deserve a leader in education that have a proven resume of getting things done for the improvement of education, because as a manager, we don't need a manager. People hire managers, but they elect leaders.
Thank you, candidates. I'd like to also thank Dakota Media Access, the Bismarck Tribune, and the volunteers from the League of Women Voters for organizing this forum this evening. Thank you to the viewers at home and the audience members here tonight for taking time to learn more about the candidates and the issues. This program will replay several times on Government Access Cable Channel 2, and we will be available for online viewing at www.freetv.org in the days leading up to the November election. Before we close this candidate forum, I want to remind you that voting information can be found through your county auditor's office. Thank you and good night.
If you enjoyed this program, would like to see it again, or send the link to your friends, it's available at freetv.org.